Studio, or on the phone, I think it is the Attorney General, Lynn Fitch. Good morning, ma'am. How are you?
Hey, Paul. Good morning. Doing well. How about yourself?
Good. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, let's do this because you've got a lot of different things going on, and I want to make sure we get them all in as much as possible during this visit. We need about 2 hours to do most of this one, but first of all, there's a couple of different legislative or different initiatives that you're doing, and one is to create a criminal cause of action for sextortion, which is something that worries me because with all of the things happening now with these new apps and everything else, this one led to a disastrous conclusion. Can you speak to that?
It certainly did, Paul. You know, all of us in the state, we're concerned about our safety, making our community safer, and certainly protecting our children, and particularly those that are out online, because these social media companies, they want to leverage, they want to take advantage of our children particularly, but they do it on so many levels, you know, scammers and hackers and so forth. But for this particular instance on sextortion, it's just horrific. These online predators get into the social media platforms because our young people, particularly our young boys, they get into a situation where this crime, they lure them in. They might take some compromising pictures. They act like they are friends, much part of a circle of influence for these young individuals. And then they take the pictures and then they say, you now have to give us $1,000. Well, 15, 16-year-olds, one, you don't have that, and two, they're falling prey to this horrific crime. So in this instance, we had an outstanding young man that we lost, which is what prompted the law for us here in Mississippi to honor the life of Walker Montgomery. So when they do that, these predators say, give me the money. If you can't give me the money, we're going to release information about you to your family, to your friends. And so it's a threat, and it continues. And then they finally say, well, if you don't give the money to us, your life is of no value. You might as well go ahead and commit suicide. Again, it's just so heartbreaking. In this instance, it happened, and there was a tragic loss of his life. And it's happening in our state. It's happening across the country. So we have proposed this legislation with the legislative partners to make this a crime, to allow us to go after these predators.
General Fitch, is this connected in any way or building on also that new app that you can superimpose a picture on a naked body anywhere? Because this has happened in schools to some young ladies, and they are equally as distraught.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and the new apps, and they're a new form of predators, the way to leverage, particularly our young people. So we'll absolutely be watching that as well. The sextortion capability to prosecute these that have committed harm against our children and others gives us that thread way to go in and to go after them and hopefully to stop some of this. But you're exactly right. With these new apps, with the AI, it's going to be a continued challenge of magnitude to go after these criminals.
And it's two different bad guys in there, because a lot of times the bad guys here are maybe in another country, or some just sex perverts, or people in a boiler room. And then the other one with the nude photos, it could be the classmates doing this. And so it never stops. It gives you a full-time job.
You're exactly right. A few years ago, grateful to our legislature, they passed revenge porn, which allowed us to prosecute. We did not have that law on the books. We were only one of 4 states that did not allow us to go in and prosecute. So once that bill was passed, it's been extremely successful so that we could go after those predators, those that might be right here, within the state or, confines of the country that were sharing those photos repeatedly. So that gave us a great cause of action.
Is there
prosecuting into that?
Sorry. Is there a bill number on that?
I do not have the bill number. I think it has just been dropped. But Senator Williams is the primary author. Again, this law to honor Walker Montgomery is based on a South Carolina law where there was a young man, same set of circumstances, same thing. That young man also took his life, Gavin. So we have was modeled it after that.
What's the consequences upon conviction?
Oh, but felony, we're going after them on everything we possibly can, as much time, and again, sex registry, everything that we can, we will go after these sex tortion predators.
Yeah,
we can't afford to not send a strong message that you're not allowed to do that to all of us, particularly for our children.
Story number 2, and man, is this ever needed. Attorney General Lynn Fitch unveiled a comprehensive campaign finance reform package for legislative consideration this session. Package closes the gaps in the law that permits out-of-state special interest to spend unlimited amounts of money to influence Mississippi elections in anonymity and with impunity. And man, this past election, it just got out of hand.
You know, you're exactly right, Paul. As everyone recalls, we had a number of instances where we were asked to investigate on different causes that happened throughout in the last campaign cycle. Clearly unethical and clearly immoral campaign behavior. But what we discovered as we got into these investigations, they weren't criminal under our current laws. So we needed to bring forth this package to the legislature so that they could tighten these laws, keep these outside special interests out, keep them from meddling in our elections, and to give all Mississippians the tools to really determine who's trying to influence their vote. And then the next step of that is we need to hold these bad actors accountable. So the package that we brought forth to the legislature is all about transparency. It's about accountability. Again, to really look at those folks that are trying to come in and change our elections, to influence our elections, and us to really not have any knowledge. Right now there are millions that come into the state, and we're not able to track them. Just to kind of give you a little bit of an overview, corporations in Mississippi have a $1,000 limit.
Right.
But it only applies to the Mississippi corporations. So if your other corporations, all the other out-of-state corporations, they can come in and spend as much as they want, face no penalty, and we can't determine who they are. So we've got to be very strong to figure out specifically the coordinated expenditures and the coordinated communication so we can determine who these folks are. So everyone should have only $1,000.
Did not realize that.
In that regard.
So wait a minute. How long has that been the law that an out-of-state has no limit and in-state has the $1,000 limit? Has that been that way for a long time?
It has for a number of years, absolutely.
It's crazy.
So we do need to close this gap. Absolutely. Because we have to give the voters the opportunity to make truly informed decisions. And if you don't know all this money's coming in, you don't know where it's coming, we can't track it, then we've kind of done a disservice to our voters. And, in that same vein, Paul, they ought to be able to look at all the campaign finance reports. Every voter should be able to go onto the Secretary of State's website and be able to determine and track any monies coming in like that. We're very supportive of our Secretary of State, but we certainly got to have readable reports, legible reports, not handwritten reports, so that everyone has the opportunity to see all the monies that are coming in and make it a very transparent situation.
When the media has such a control, the mainstream media, on disinformation, they can do some incredible things like make you believe you're better off now than you were 3 years ago. Or under the Trump administration. In the last 3 years, you're a lot better off. So they can do all of these things. And that's why I said when we talk about the initiative process, we've got to have this hand in hand because with money coming in, especially from out of state, they can take just about anything that winds up easily on an initiative ballot and give a pretty good run at it, which is a little scary.
Oh, it does. Again, we're allowing out-of-state influencers to determine and to pick who the candidates should be in our state. And that's a very unfair disadvantage for our voters to be put in that pot.
But we cool with it. Let me get to back to the visit from the Attorney General. When you're talking about transparency and changing that, Are you satisfied with how far you could go with this one, that we actually finally get transparency on who these people are, in state and out of state?
Well, I think then, Paul, you have to certainly add penalties. We've got to have enforcement authorities. We need to give the Secretary of State the sole authority to enforce civil penalties. Right now the current law is split with the Ethics Commission. So it really bogs down this whole process. So many times what happens, and we saw that happen in the instance, the different requests to investigate in the last campaign season, by the time you get through all that, you've missed your window of opportunity. Yeah. And sometimes the election is over. So we really do have to enhance those penalties for violations and really make that perjury really a significant penalty. And I think as we do that, that signifies to, one, those outside sources, you're not going to come in and effectuate the changes in our voting system. You're not going to pick our candidates. Mississippians are going to pick their candidates, and we have very strong campaign finance laws.
And you just open up a whole new can of worms when you start talking about that and updating things and finally bringing that together from the areas of ethics or the Attorney General's office or the state auditor's office. And do you think it needs to be a review of all of that structure?
Well, it absolutely does. And these are just these gaping holes that we see we could effectuate change very quickly. But the biggest one, Paul, is if you look at all the monies that come in from these corporations, and there's no tracking, there's no limit, yet we have corporate contributions from Mississippi corporations at $1,000. We know exactly who that is. We can't tell because there's no basis or tracking mechanisms for the other corporations.
Well, it's aggravating. It's aggravating for the media too, and for a lot of folks out there. Certainly, the base of any particular candidate, when they hear something that's blatantly a lie, and you try to track this down to who said that and who's responsible for this, and you can't do it because it's almost like trying to find out who the real Nigerian prince is into a scam. It's very difficult to do it.
It is. It's a very much of a challenge. And, we're still continuing to investigate. And if some of these laws are passed, that gives us even more teeth to go after these people who have violated our election laws. Yeah. We're really grateful and working with our legislative partners because this is monumental. This is so important for the state of Mississippi to pass these comprehensive campaign finance laws.
Absolutely. Today more than ever before, because the way that they're just swinging out of control, who knows what they're going to look like if we don't stop it now in 4 or 5 elections from here. One other thing I want to mention too, because and I think this is important. I know we have several bills, excuse me, that are going to be addressing this. One of the things is to improve notification process to ensure parole hearings are fully informed by law enforcement, prosecutors, and victims. Can you speak to that?
Oh, I absolutely can. We've seen that now come up in the last year or so where parole hearings provide no notification to the law enforcement that were involved, to the prosecutors, and to the victims and their families. So many times these families have been totally surprised, as have, the ones that prosecuted and the law enforcement, to know that this particular individual may be about to get out and there's not been a voice. So we certainly need this law. I think it would be very impactful, particularly, again, to make that information necessary so that all of the parties would have that notification.
Anything else breaking that you want to mention before we end our visit here?
Oh, I always have a lot of great things. One thing on crime, too, I do want to mention.
Sure.
We have a gang violence bill at the legislature. It's really important. We need to have penalties for these criminals that are exhibiting gang activities. And if they do that, then they're going to get double the time, because we have to say to these gangs, you are not allowed to keep recruiting our young children. And Paul, they're recruiting young children as young as 12, 13, and 14 to get in these gangs and commit just horrific crimes. So one that we need to really embrace and pass this year.
We've never seen anything like this, but I mean, I can do the next 15 minutes on stories from Memphis to the Gulf Coast on kids who are 13, 14, certainly 15 and above, who are stealing multiple cars and creating crimes almost on a daily basis. You're absolutely right. I thank you for taking the time, ma'am. Appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you, Paul. Always a pleasure to be on SuperTalk.
You got it. Let us know. Jot me a note on what the bill numbers happen to be when they're done and assigned, and we will put a spotlight on them.